Welcome to Great Day, Colorado's community podcast show. For this episode, we are discussing the gig economy. I'm DJ Mikey D, coming to you with the real story behind the numbers. For this episode, we are diving deep into what really happens to rideshare drivers during the massive layoffs that continues to sweep through the tech, finance, and retail industry. While corporate earnings and stock prices dominated the headlines, there was another story unfolding on the streets, literally. As thousands of salaried workers lost their jobs, many turned to gig platforms like Uber and Lyft for immediate income. But what seemed like a logical solution created a perfect storm for drivers who'd been relying on this work long term. Think about it. When you suddenly have thousands of new drivers hitting the road in major metro areas, what happens? Supply goes way up, but demand doesn't necessarily follow at the same pace. The result? More drivers competing for the same number of rides, which means individual utilization rates plummeted, especially during off-peak hours. A listener in Denver, who had been laid off her corporate job just before the pandemic in 2018, says this: "I lost my corporate recruiting job, and let me tell you, that moment changed everything. At first, I did what everyone does, send out hundreds of resumes, but the responses? Either lowball offers or complete silence. I remember thinking, is this really what my experience is worth? After a few months of that frustration, I made a decision that would define the next few years of my life. I started driving for Lyft and Uber rideshare services. I began with a Honda CRX, just doing the regular rides. But then I discovered something that would change my trajectory: black car rides. My first black car ride was on Lyft, just over a mile long, and I made $21. I remember that moment so clearly, sitting in my car thinking, I can do this. But this year has been different. The demand for rides in my area has just plummeted. I used to be able to count on making at least $300 a day. That was my baseline, what I needed to pay my bills. Now, sometimes it takes me 2 full days to reach that same amount. And I'm driving way more miles to earn less money, which means my expenses are actually higher while my income is dropping. It's a perfect storm of financial pressure. Last September, I made $4,549 on Lyft alone. This September, $1,166. That's a 75% drop in 1 year. I've been trying to understand why. I spoke with drivers in Denver, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, who reported their effective hourly earnings dropping by 20 to 30% almost overnight. One driver told me, it used to be I could count on making $25 minus 30 an hour during weekdays. Now I'm lucky to clear $18 after expenses. That's a massive hit when you're trying to pay rent and put food on the table. That's so heartbreaking to get a message like that. And here's where it gets really interesting. The platforms themselves responded to this driver surplus by scaling back incentives. Those sign-up bonuses that used to be $500 or more, gone in many markets. Per-trip bonuses, drastically reduced. Guaranteed hourly pay programs, phased out. The platforms essentially had their pick of drivers, so why pay extra? This created what economists call a race to the bottom in terms of driver compensation. With more desperate people willing to work for less, the bargaining power shifted almost entirely to the platforms. Drivers who'd been relying on those bonuses and guarantees suddenly found their incomes becoming much more volatile and unpredictable. Now, many drivers responded by working longer hours or signing up for multiple platforms simultaneously, but this created its own problems. More wear and tear on vehicles, higher maintenance costs, and significant mental fatigue from constantly switching between apps and chasing the best fares. What's particularly concerning is how this dynamic created what labor experts are calling trap situations. Lower-income drivers who couldn't afford periods of unemployment found themselves stuck working more hours for less pay, with little time or energy to search for better opportunities. It became a vicious cycle that was hard to escape. The demographic shift among drivers was also notable. We saw an influx of college-educated professionals who'd been laid off from tech companies and financial firms. Many thought they'd just be driving for a few months while they searched for new jobs, but as hiring freezes extended, that temporary gig work stretched into 6 months, a year, or longer for some. This influx of higher-educated drivers changed the conversation around platform work. These weren't people who saw driving as a long-term career. They were using it as a bridge, and they brought different expectations about pay, working conditions, and transparency. Naturally, this led to increased organizing and advocacy. Digital driver groups saw massive membership growth, and we saw more coordinated actions pushing for minimum pay floors, better transparency in how algorithms dispatch rides, and access to benefits like unemployment insurance. The platforms, for their part, continued to emphasize flexibility and the entrepreneurial narrative that drivers were independent business owners making their own choices. But when you're driving because you lost your primary income source, how much choice is really involved? We also saw more disputes between drivers and passengers as platform rules and pricing structures shifted. When earnings are tight, every cancellation fee or fare adjustment becomes critically important, leading to more tension during what should be simple transactions. So where does this leave us? The 2025 layoff wave exposed fundamental tensions in the gig economy model. Platforms served as crucial safety nets during economic turmoil, but at what cost to driver welfare and sustainable earnings? The long-term outcome will depend on platform business decisions, regulatory responses, and how quickly the broader labor market recovers. Will gig work emerge as a stable bridge to better opportunities, remain a precarious fallback, or evolve into a reformed component of our labor market with better protections and fair compensation? That's the billion-dollar question. Thanks for tuning in to the gig economy discussion on Great Day, Colorado. Until next time, drive safe and know your worth.